Sorry we're starting a little bit late, especially for those of you on the live stream who have not been able to have a chat and a glass of wine while you were waiting, so many apologies for that. But welcome to our panel on Startup, Scale Up, But How, in conjunction with Tech City and Startup Grind. My name is Thorold Barker. I'm the editor for the Wall Street Journal in Europe, Middle East and Africa, and I'm thrilled to have this fantastic lineup of speakers for you this evening, and thank you all for showing up here in person, and for those of you who are on the stream as well for this conversation. Just going to quickly introduce everybody. Sarah Wood is co-founder of Unruly and has plenty of experience in scaling up. The viral video company now employs 200 people in 15 offices around the world, I believe. And Sarah hopefully feels at home here at the News Building because the company was acquired by News Corp just last year. She's also a technology ambassador for London, an associate lecturer at Cambridge University, and one of the 15 women to watch in technology, according to Inc. Eileen Burbidge also has multitasking down to a fine art as a partner at VC fund Passion Capital, chair of Tech City, part of David Cameron's business advisory group, fintech envoy appointed by George Osborne, tech ambassador for Boris Johnson while he was mayor of London, and hopefully she'll have some interesting insights on the Brexit debate later on and what it means for tech. Eileen also has experience at the sharp end of business with operational roles at Yahoo, Skype, and Apple. Harry Briggs is founding partner of early-stage venture fund BGF Ventures. Before that, he was both an investor at Balderton Capital and an entrepreneur who founded Tonics, a health drinks company. Say again?
Firefly, doesn't matter.
Apologies. Did I get that wrong? Apologies. He's also a true Renaissance man. He co-founded a chamber choir called Voce, which once enjoyed a brief moment of fame accompanying the Rolling Stones at Glastonbury. And it's on YouTube if you want to check it out. It's fun. And last but not least, Suranga Chandratillake, who joined venture fund Balderton as general partner in 2014. Previously, he was an entrepreneur as well, and founded Blinks, the intelligent search engine for video, in 2004. He took the firm public in London, and it was at one stage worth over $1 billion. Like Eileen, he will bring great context, having worked both in Silicon Valley and in London. So please welcome our fabulous panel. Before I start, we're going to have plenty of time for questions at the end, and we're using Slido, the app that hopefully you've all downloaded, so you can submit your questions and vote on the questions, and we will try and answer as many as we can at the end. So, Sarah, I just wanted to kick off with you, and can you just give us a sense of, you've built Unruly quickly into a global company, and ultimately decided to take it to the next level by selling to News Corp. Can you just talk us through the story and some of the things that you learnt along the way in terms of what works and what doesn't when scaling up rapidly?
So it didn't feel that quick, is the first thing to say. So, 10 years is a long time if you're an entrepreneur. And one of the big things I learned very early on was it's a marathon, not a sprint. So there were many moments over those 10 years when things were really tricky, when we weren't sure if we were going to be able to pull off a new office, when we weren't sure that we had our hiring policies straight, when our product needed to evolve very quickly because the marketplace was changing so rapidly. But yeah, I did learn that getting the pacing right was absolutely critical. And I think the thing I learned more than anything about scaling is the team and scaling the team. So talk to the team as you're scaling. So that everybody understands how you're growing, where you're growing, why you're growing, where you're going, how they will be part of that journey, and then develop the team. I do remember there was one moment after we took our Series A, we took a 25 million Series A, so quite a chunky Series A in early 2012. And at that point, we thought this is a good opportunity to skill up and to bring in some more senior folks with more experience. And in retrospect, that was not a great idea because we had a fantastic younger team who were already doing an amazing job. And we should have, at that point, spent more time devoting more time to them, helping them to scale. So always helping to develop your team as you scale so that they feel it's their journey too is absolutely key. And then it's great, then it's happy days because when you've done that and when you can trust that team, then you can delegate to that team. And then that helps you scale even faster. So talking to the team, training the team, trusting the team, all that becomes an accelerator on growth, an accelerator on scaling.
And the big no-no for you?
The big no-no. I don't know that I have a big no-no.
All right, well, we'll get there later on.
Okay, I'll think on that.
Well, actually, just one more thing before we move on to Suranga and get his experience very quickly. But you then chose to sell rather than to take more money and grow yourselves or to IPO or other things. I mean, can you talk us through sort of what drove you to that decision and what the advantages of that?
So we weren't looking to sell as the first thing. We were really happily growing, and we'd been growing at a very sustainable fashion, 30% year on year. So not meteoric, massive growth, but really nice growth, growing out the product set, growing into new territories, really enjoying ourselves. But we could see, first of all, we could see that we wanted a step change. And if you're an entrepreneur and you enjoy growth and you enjoy new challenges, then you kind of crave something new. And then when we met the news team and we could see what they had to offer, we could see all their fantastic titles, the Times, the Wall Street Journal, and there are so many more globally. So the global footprint was fantastic and a great fit with ours. The titles were phenomenal, and we knew immediately that if we ran our campaigns across news titles, we'd be running better campaigns. So that really helped us decision make. We decision made on the values. So deliver wow, embrace change, share the love. And we were thinking to ourselves as founders, does doing that deal embody those values? And we felt that it really did. So that kind of guided the decision making.
Good. Suranga, give us a sense of your experience. You took a slightly different route and took the company public later in the day as well.
What kind of love the Wall Street Journal shares, that's all. No, absolutely. So we did take a different route. I think, but the challenge is actually exactly the same things that Sarah just talked about. I mean, it's all to do with the team, because really the growth is a function of the team. So you, on the one hand, have to grow, you have to build, you have to hire more people, you have to help the existing people grow, and that's just a very, very disruptive process in a variety of ways. Bringing new people in creates a lot of anxiety for people who are already there. It also has challenges of its own, because you've got to figure out who the right people are and how to get them to be as effective as possible, as quickly as possible. And then even with growth from inside, I think one of the things that I learned that was a little bit, sad, is that not everybody will grow with the company. There are people who are amazing at a particular job or a particular role for a certain stage of your company, but they're just the wrong person for that same role at the next stage of the company. And there are people where as amazing as they were, you have to figure out what you can do with them going forward, because they're not going to keep that role, because they're not going to scale into that, which is a really, really tough thing to do if it's someone who's been there from the very early days and had a huge impact on the company, but maybe isn't going to be able to scale to do that. So there are lots of challenges, but I think a lot of them ultimately boil down to people and growing that team and allowing for it to be bigger but performing.
How do you keep them focused and motivated on that journey, particularly in your situation when you have gone public and the share price does very well, and then maybe it gets more difficult? The share price is an amazingly is an amazingly difficult thing to deal with, because I think that you can Steve Jobs was famous for creating this reality distortion effect, right? I don't know if you've heard of that concept, but apparently if you were near Steve Jobs, everything seemed bright and wonderful and the birds were chirping. And he was very good at creating that kind of thing. And I think good CEOs and good leaders are able to, even when things are not going brilliantly with the business, remind people of the fact that there's a bigger goal here, and that it's okay that we lost this deal or we lost that customer, but it's okay because the direction we're going in is the right direction. It's really hard to do that if you have a share price tagged to you every day. Because every day, every employee stares at the share price, and it's like being graded on a daily basis whether you're doing well or not. And of course, it has, on a daily basis, nothing to do with how the company's doing, right? You could have closed the biggest deal in the world today, but because that's not public information, the share price could go down, right? Similarly, you could have lost your biggest customer, and the share price will go up, because nobody knows that until a quarter later, when suddenly they discover and the right thing happens. So that's a really, really tough thing, is getting people off that short-termism that comes with being on a public company, which is a huge topic in its own. But I think regarding sort of long-term motivation, for us, it was all about, as Sarah again mentioned, this sort of step change idea. We felt like we often built the company in these sort of phases or tranches, and we knew what the next phase was, and that's what we were aiming for. And it could be to do with the scale of the business, it could be to do with being able to have certain kinds of customers or finishing a particular product, and that's what we were always aiming for. And we'd always make the next big step a really big one. And if you do that, and if the steps are big enough and inspiring enough, then I think the right people find that very motivating, because they say, wow, I couldn't believe that we made it from A to B, and now Suranga's saying C. Can we really do C? I'm not sure we can, but we should try. And if you can create that sort of energy, then that's a very powerful thing. Interesting. Harry, you you wrote a post when you left Balderton, which I actually read earlier on. And one of the things you talked about was the insecurity you had when you joined, and then you did your first deal, which was Hut Group, I believe, and that it was all about meeting the CEO and having this sort of belief in his ability, even though the technology wasn't very exciting, to actually drive this thing through. I mean, can you give a sense of your perspective from an investor of how you see this people issue and how much of a driving force that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fundamental. And of course, we're seeing hundreds of companies, so you can easily, it's a hard thing to kind of grab hold of, and it's obviously very subjective, and it can be biased by how you're feeling, and it can be, it's also something, by the way, that I think continually changes, in that the bar of what great looks like continues to rise. And that, I think, is one of the hardest things about being an investor, that an entrepreneur who seemed great compared to the entrepreneurs of 3 years ago at that stage might not actually be great today, because there's just that many more great entrepreneurs in the market. I mean, I think my biggest sort of defining characteristic that I was looking for then was that I'd just left my startup, and I was at the time thinking, I'm going to do a couple of years of venture before I go and do another startup, and I'm basically just here to sort of figure out what to do and who to do it with. And obviously got a bit hooked on venture in the process, but my sort of mission was, my test was, would I give up the next 5 years of my life or 10 years of my life to go and work for this CEO? And that is a ridiculously high bar if you're an ambitious person that sort of thinks, life is short. And I was still in my early 30s then, and I probably got one shot, two shots left, and and he was one of those entrepreneurs that you kind of think, wow, it'd be a ride and a half, and it would probably be pretty scary, and but I would totally do that with him. Now, obviously, I didn't, because we invested instead, and that, in a way, is joining the ride in its own way. But that's probably still the sort of biggest test for me of is this a company that I want to invest in?
And is that very much based on instinct from meeting them?
Yeah, I mean, you have to balance a bit of rational with emotional. So there are characteristics you're looking for. You're looking for someone who's got passion and I guess expertise in what they're doing, or at least enough, hopefully some sort of vision about their market, which goes a bit further than most of the other people in the market. You're hopefully looking for someone who has the leadership qualities that they'll be able to hire amazing people. Hopefully they've already started managing to hire some people that seem really impressive compared to the stage of the business. Hopefully you're looking for people with integrity, that you'd be happy to sort of trust their judgment on things when times are bad as well as when they're good. So yes, you can assess a lot of those qualities. I guess nowadays increasingly important is technical skills as well. I think he wasn't a particularly technical founder, the Hut Matt Moulding, but he was a sort of accountant / retail guy. But nowadays, I think we're probably backing fewer and fewer founders that aren't in some way technical, either engineers or coders, I'd say.
Interesting.
Sorry.
So Eileen, I mean, how does the talent pool here in London look compared with Silicon Valley? I mean, is there the depth of talent required here to create the next Google, to create these big companies that the US has been churning out for many years?
I think I'm going to sort of separate that into different questions.
That's probably reasonable. It was meant to be two questions, but I kind of elided them.
Yeah, so I think first of all, it's really important just to think about the talent pool relative to where we've been.
Yep.
And I think there's never been a better time to actually start a technology company here in London or in the UK. And I'm sure fellow investors would agree, and so would Sarah as she tries to hire people. When I first moved to London 12 years ago, the sort of job role of software product manager, as an example, did not exist. So I couldn't hire product managers when I was at Skype and head of product. We've come a long way, and I think there are even sort of third-party statistics, for instance, Stack Overflow, which is a third-party website where people sort of self-register, self-identify themselves online, which will say that London has more software engineers and software developers than any other city in the world. So I think that's brilliant. More than 40,000 people are software engineers in London. So we have a great absolute sort of number of talent. We have, I think, fewer years of a heritage of ambition and of wanting to sort of be entrepreneurs, I think, in London than Silicon Valley or other hubs around the world. But we are catching up really quickly. And I think there's a lot of reasons why now we in London and in the UK are attracting entrepreneurs from everywhere else around the world to set up their businesses here. So I think there were a lot of different sort of facets to your question, but the talent pool here is certainly sufficient enough, I think was the end of your question, to build the next set of great businesses, whether they're Unruly or otherwise in other areas.
Do we have the ecosystem around that in terms of
100%.
the investment and everything else?
I think 100%. I mean, I think I'm very lucky because I have a personal experience of Skype, of having been at Skype, which is what brought me to London. But that's still, I think, the only business that I know of that has sold for multi-billion dollars twice over. It was based in London. It was run out of London. That was 2005 for the first exit, and then 2008 the second time it sold. There's no reason why we can't replicate that success and do it time and time again from here in the UK.
Okay. One thing, I'm just going to get this out of the way because it is obviously a big issue at the moment. How much difference would it make if we leave? Is it a big deal for the tech sector?
So this is me personally. I need to establish that for the record.
Well,
you were very kind to sort of mention the sort of other roles that I have, and I do. I sit on the Prime Minister's Business Advisory Group. I'm chair of Tech City. Personally, as an investor and as a mother, as a person who sort of is now a British citizen, I think it's extremely important that we stay in the European Union. I think that it makes a huge difference that we are part of a market that's 500 million people. I think it makes a huge difference as an investor that we can attract talent from across the European Union. I think if we were isolated and if we were outside of the European Union, we'd have so many more challenges to what we're trying to do with the economy and how much momentum we have today that it would be incredibly detrimental. I think it is extremely important for all of the economic reasons that we stay as part of the European Union. As an American who has now immigrated here and now is a British citizen, I think, for me, there's no question, but that is a very personal opinion on my part.
Do any of you disagree with that from a tech perspective? No. Okay, well, let's park that. But I mean, if you look at, Sarah, if you look at the, historically tech companies have had to succeed in the US largely to be big. Is that still very much the case? Even with, as you've said, the single market in the EU, which is a bigger economy than the US, is that still the case that the US is the market to crack?
Well, it does have a natural advantage in that it is a huge market, and I sometimes think it's challenging being in the UK. Because you're neither a huge market, and you can go into Europe, but there are challenges to that. There are language barriers, there are logistical barriers. So we're neither a huge market, nor a very tiny market, not small enough to be a seedbed, not large enough to be able to just crack our own territory and succeed globally. But I think that actually places us in quite a unique position and gives us an advantage, which is we can get going in our own market, but we do need to look beyond our own boundaries and do that pretty quickly. And that's one of the things I think I've really enjoyed about being in London is it's a great place to start a global business because you're right in the centre of all the time zones. So it's pretty straightforward for us to start looking west and look east and be able to manage a fair amount of that from here in London operationally. And it also feels like we're a great bridge between the US and other European territories. So that has been tremendously useful to us as we've been growing.
Interesting. You wanted to add to that?
I just wanted to chime in. I could not agree more with what Sarah was saying. And again, to harken back to my Skype experience, I don't know if many people sort of will remember because it's been now more than a decade, but Skype actually succeeded in spite of not ever entering the US as a market. Part of that reason was not necessarily by design, but Nicholas Zenstrom and Jonas Friis, who were the founders, had founded Kazaa before doing Skype. Yep. Which was a file-sharing network similar to Napster and the like. And they were under subpoena and under lawsuit by the Recording Industry Association of America. So for that reason, they did not travel to America.
It was tough to start a business in the US.
They were basically like, F you, America. I mean, frankly, that was the attitude. There was no interest in acquiescing to the US market or saying that we needed to win America as a market. Very, very clear on their part. And so as a company that was based in London with a development team in the Baltics, The strategy was everywhere else but America, which is very possible out of London, and only out of London can you then address all of Europe and then all of the Far East and Asia. I mean, it was because of corridors that Skype was enabling phone calls and communication to India or to Southeast Asia, that and partnerships with the likes of PC Home or Tom, which are now big players globally as well. But that is, so I don't believe that you need the US in order to succeed.
Okay, Suranga, again, you've worked on both sides. You spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley. Do you think we've come of age now where you actually you can make a business here?